You're listening to the God Life Culture Podcast, where faith
and what's trending
collide.
Welcome to the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. This is Eddie.
What's up, everyone? This is Miguel, and we are telling you welcome back to the God Life Culture Podcast. We are so glad that you are here, tuning in to another episode of our podcast. If this is your first time listening, like always, welcome. Hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. Thank you for taking this journey with us, and we hope that you are blessed week after week by our conversations, by our episodes, and we are hoping that you are sharing the podcast as well and checking us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts or engage in social media, you can find us there. Eddie,
Yes.
what are we talking about today?
Listen, the other day I was on social media and this reel came up of TD Jakes, and he was preaching, but then he was also speaking about how sometimes men are specific or different from women. And the example he was giving was that sometimes we just want the answer. When we ask a question, just give us the answer, whatever it is. And he was explaining how there was this one time he came home from work and he asked his wife what was for dinner. And then she replies, oh, well, I was going to make, let's say, fish. I was going to go make fish. So I went to the supermarket. But then when I got there, I saw that the price was too high. So then I decided to go to a different supermarket. And while I was there, I bumped into Jackie. Jackie was telling me that her kids are now going to a new school because of, and then the wife just kept going down the whole thing. And then like 20 minutes later, and we're having chicken for dinner. It's kind of like, okay, thank you. But you should have maybe lead with that. Right. We're going to have this. By the way, while I was out shopping, I bumped into X, Y, and Z. And I think that sometimes, it's something that I thought was very funny because sometimes I can relate to that. The idea that it's not that I'm not interested in the story you're about to give me. It's just that, can you appease me by just giving me the answer first? And then we'll jump into the story about the 23 people you met on your way to get dinner and all the stuff that happened. And I think that, sometimes I feel like people can get frustrated with dudes sometimes because, we'll ask a question and then we're like, okay, but can you get to the point? Or what's the answer? What's the this? Something as simple as what's for dinner maybe isn't as important, right? But it's like I'll have this experience where I'm at work and I'm emailing someone, or I call someone. I was like, "Hey, what's happening with the production of X, Y, and Z?" And then instead of them just telling me what's happening, they're talking about all the other stuff that goes into whatever is happening. It's like, yeah, but I need that answer because I have a deadline. I have something that I need to do. I have another email I need to send. So I need your response ASAP so that I can then do the next thing I'm going to go do. Yeah. So sometimes, the idea, it's not that we don't care. Right. It's not that we're disinterested. It's just sometimes there's
get to the point, right? Yeah. Get to that final. For me, it's so funny because there are times where my wife can do this and it's hilarious, right? Because I'm there and she knows it and she'll be like, stop, but listen to what I'm saying. Because she'll say something really juicy, right? She'll say something like, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what happened. Yeah. And I'm like, what? And then she starts, right? And she'll start talking about like the people involved or what's happening or what she saw. And then like one thing will like move her to like a different topic, right? Yeah. So now she's giving me details, right, about what people said and what was happening. And then there was something on the wall over there. So they kept looking at that thing on the wall. And then they heard this comment. Then a dog barked outside. It reminded me of the dog that we saw. And I'm there listening like, but what happened? Right? And it's this suspense, right? And it's just so funny because, she's very detail oriented. So she'll know like the details and she'll know what happened. And she's telling you, but she's like reliving it too. So it's like she looked over here and then she saw this and then she saw that. And then it's like, but what happened? And my face is very expressive. Yeah. So I'm there like, but what happened, right? So I think it's so, it's funny when you are put in situations like that, right? Because it's clear the differences between men and women, right? And I think that a lot of times when, the men may not fully understand how the women operate, or the women may not fully understand how the men operate and how they think and how they process things, right? That creates tension and that creates conflict. And I think like at the beginning of your marriage, you kind of deal with all that too, right? Yeah. You like, and even throughout, but I think that there are moments in the beginning where it's like, no, I am paying attention. Like, I didn't really have anything to say at this moment, but I'm paying attention, So I think that's one of the other things that is a difference, right? Yeah. That I think, men in general would want women to understand, and just other people as well. The idea that silence doesn't always mean I'm not interested or I don't care or I'm not engaged, right? And I think that a lot of times it's easy to forget the thoughts that go through our minds in a day, right? And whether it is responsibilities that you have at work, responsibilities you have at home, things that are coming up, right? Financial responsibilities and pressure, right? To have to meet certain things or buy certain things or pay certain bills, and just certain things coming up that, even sometimes for me personally, I internalize all of that pressure kind of like stays in. Yeah. And there'll be moments where I am silent and I'm not upset. I'm not mad or aggravated. I'm just silent because I have a lot that I'm processing. Right. And even that could happen because of your job. Yeah. For me, working with kids all day and high schoolers, and there's always a lot of activity happening and a lot of talking and a lot of conversations and back and forth. Sometimes after work, I just need quiet and I just need to like not talk for a little bit. Yeah, you know what I mean? That doesn't always mean I don't want to talk to you, right? And that's something that, even with my wife, it's, something that, we have that clear understanding in too, where it's like I just got home from work, right? And it's like I have the routine that I'm always, that what I do when I get home, but it's like we've learned that and we respect that as well. And there are things with her that it's like I know she's doing that and it's not meaning this. That's just how she operates, or just how she processes information, or how she decompresses or unwinds. So I think you have to learn that, and that takes trial and error to learn that. But silence doesn't always mean I don't care. No, sometimes when men are silent, there's a lot going on in our minds that we may not always express, a lot of pressures that we have that we may not always express, and that is also a problem, right? That we may not just express certain things and internalize it.
Yeah, and I think the situation with silence, it's very situational as well. I think there's a difference between, you're having a very serious conversation and, your partner or whoever, just like spill their guts or just like share something very important with you, and then you're just staring at them. Okay. You need to be able to acknowledge and say, I heard what you said. I'm just processing it. Yeah. Because I think that, there are situations where it's kind of like you're still maybe like processing a situation, but you gotta make it known that you are processing. Because if not, it comes off like you don't care, or it comes off like you're trying to grasp at straws for a response, when it's not that you're trying to grasp for a response. It's just like you're like really processing everything and letting everything marinate.
Yeah. Or if, someone just poured out their guts, like you said, and they ask you a question and you didn't say anything because you really spaced out in that moment. Like, that's a problem. That's not that you're silently processing information. That's that you weren't listening, right? So I think that, it's those situations too that you just have to be careful, where it's like, make sure if you're silent, you're processing and not distracted and not paying attention.
Yeah, but then I think that there are other situations. Like I think about when we're driving, like me or my wife, we're like driving somewhere, and sometimes maybe it's a long distance and I'm like quiet. And like she can pick up that I'm thinking about something. Yeah. So she'll ask me like, "Oh, what are you thinking about?" Like, nothing. It's really nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's like I'm thinking about that I have to send an email at work on Tuesday, but I gotta remember that I gotta CC X, Y, and Z. Like it's like really like insignificant. So I'll be like, "Oh, it's nothing." And it's not me being like, oh, I don't want to tell you. It's a secret type of situation. It's just, it's really not. I was thinking about the paper clip I left on the desk that I'm like, oh, I got to put that back in the paper clip jar because it's supposed to be organized and clean or whatever. Or I could just be thinking about a video game. Like I'm thinking about the fact that they're about to launch a new character in 2 weeks. I have to make sure I have enough coins to purchase a new, like, sometimes it's really insignificant stuff that sometimes when we say it's really nothing, it really is nothing. It really is nothing. And it's not for you to get offended or to you to get upset about. There are times where, maybe it is a little something and you do need to like encourage the other person or encourage the husband or the boyfriend or whoever to like be like, oh, are you sure though? Like, I've noticed your X, Y, and Z. Then that's different. You could definitely do that. But if it's a situation where I was just driving, listening to music and he's spaced out and you're like wondering why he's quiet, he's thinking about that paper clip on the desk. It really isn't anything too crazy. Yeah.
And it was funny because, we're talking about this topic and the conversation of, when you ask what they want to eat, right? And it's like, they say men really don't care. Just, pick a spot, right? Yeah. And it's true. Sometimes when it comes to certain decisions, right? Yeah. It's like really drawn out. It can be really like, planned and all of that. And then there are moments where it's like, honestly, I don't care where we eat. I don't care what time we go. I don't care what time we get there, right? Like there's just certain things where it's like, whatever works best, then that's what we're going to do, So again, I think a lot of times, it takes an understanding of both parties, right? Because in all of these things, if you know that your wife is detail oriented, if you know that your wife is a planner, if you know that your wife likes to schedule things, then I think there is a meeting in the middle that needs to happen, right? Where on both sides, where if you know your husband's more spontaneous, kind of respecting that as well. But if your wife is definitely a planner, how can you meet in the middle where maybe not everything is scheduled and not everything is planned, right? Yeah, sure. And I think a lot of times, when it comes down to this idea, men are mind readers, so there are times where you may ask, right, your wife or your significant other, your girlfriend, even just, a female friend or whatever, how they're doing, and they may not give you like a clear response. And then it could turn into a moment of like, but you didn't ask more, or you didn't pry, or you didn't tell, right? Where at times it's like, you may not know how that person is really feeling, right? Or like what's really happening up there, like what are you really thinking about? And a lot of times, like, I know you do this with just like in general with people, right? Like you'll give them like 3 chances.
Put me on blast. Yes.
Right. You'll be like, all right, I asked you once, you said everything's good. Okay, I ask you again. And that is something that is a boundary and a healthy boundary. Because then you can't help individuals who don't want to be helped, or you can't, speak to someone who doesn't want to tell you what's happening after you've asked them a few times. And obviously that changes when it comes to your spouse, and that changes when it comes to, close family members and stuff, right? Where it's like, okay, you're not telling me, but you need to tell me, right? What is happening? There are certain times you can't accept that no or that nothing as an answer.
Yeah. And I think that, at least with that rule or boundary that I put, a lot of times I use it as a way for the other person to acknowledge that I understand something is up. You may not be ready to talk about it, and just in case you're waiting for me, because sometimes people they kind of want the person to like ask them more than once. So in case you're waiting for someone to ask you more than once, then okay, I'll ask you more than once. But after like the 3rd time that I'm asking and you're still not ready, then I would finish that with, okay, then so when you're ready, I'm here and I'm waiting and I'm available whenever you are. And I think that sometimes as you get older and as you start developing different relationships and friendships with people, you learn how to navigate certain things, but you also then learn how to to establish boundaries that help create peace for you as well, because that's very important also, and that you communicate what that boundary is going to look like, because I think that as a guy, it may be easy for you to be like, well, I asked, I'm done. I check that off the list. I did my part or whatever. But sometimes it takes a little bit more effort than that. Yeah. But you also then don't want to create a bad habit where you have to do things to the extreme in order to get a response. So then that's when you establish a boundary or relationship, a boundary in that relationship. I've told you that. I was like, well, you sure? Because you got 2 more tries. After that, then it's up to you. Whenever you're ready to talk about it, we'll talk about it. And I think, it works differently for everybody. And I also think that there's certain things that don't really everybody's different. Not all the guys are the same.
Yeah.
Not all guys operate the same way. And same thing for females. You know, they don't operate the same way either. You know, a lot of times we would categorize women as being highly detailed oriented, and they want all the juicy details and all that stuff. But my wife makes me laugh because when it comes to reading, she doesn't like that. She wants you to get to the point. Mm-hmm. Say Jake was wearing a red shirt. He walked down the stairs and fell. She doesn't want to know the texture of the floor. She doesn't want to know if it had rugs. She doesn't want to know the season. She doesn't want to know nothing of that.
She wants to know if he made it.
She just wants to know, did he make it? So it's kind of the same way how in the beginning we were saying, like, if I ask you a question, just tell me. You know, she likes to read books that just get to the point. Don't waste 53 pages on painting the scenery. Painting the scenery. As for me, I like for you to paint the scenery, and I like you to, you know, especially like the type of books that I read, I want to understand the world or the universe that this book is taking place in.
Yeah.
You know, I want to know what season it is. I want to know the culture of the people. I want to know what kind of town it is, you know, and everybody is just different. So in the same way that people have preferences when it comes to reading books, there's people that have preferences in reference to communication. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're in a relationship, that's then where you have to start to, mold those preferences so that they, you know, you can still hold your identity as someone who, I just need you to get to the point, but then also understanding that you're connected to someone who is detail oriented and wants to tell you everything. Mm-hmm. So then that's when you communicate, give me the answer first, and then we'll jump into all the extra stuff that happened that may work for you. And if it doesn't, then it may have to be the opposite. You may have to be okay with the 15-minute explanation about Janet's kids when that's not what you asked about. You were asking something else. But that's something that you work out and you make happen for you guys.
Yeah. And it's funny because, you know, we had our conference, right, a few weeks back, and not to like rehash certain things, but there was something that Priscilla said that really stood out to me when she was talking, and I believe it's on the live podcast, where she asks that someone sometimes asks her, is affection enough to sustain a marriage or keep a marriage, right? And or love, right? And she was kind of saying how we confuse love and affection, right? And how a lot of times we view love as affection. And she was like, love is Jesus. And like the idea of, you know, sacrificing and giving your all and all of that unconditional, and affection is something else. So she was like, you know, affection isn't enough to keep you. You need love, and love is not just affection, right? And I think that a lot of times when it comes to the conversation between men and women, right, it's very much like the women are the ones that need the affection and that love affection, and men aren't affectionate, right? But then again, that is a generalization that is made, but there are those men, right? And I would say a lot of men, right, who desire affection as well, you know? And I think that that's something that, you know, they also may not know how to communicate that. They may not know how to express that. I want more hugs, right? But it's something like you know, it's something that, they will need to develop, right, that that boldness and that just that expression to be able to speak, right, and ask and say what's on your mind and say what you want, right, and express yourself in that way. And I think that a lot of times, you know, when it comes to this idea of men and women, there are generalizations that are made that aren't always fair, you know, that aren't always true. Like you said, right, not all women are detail oriented and want all the details, right? Not all women are super emotional. Not all men are, disengaged with their emotions and emotionless and all of that. No, there are men out there that are also emotional, right? And all of those things. So I think it's important to know that culture's generalizations when it comes to men, right? And culture's a lot of times perspective and stereotypes aren't always true. And I think that when we engage, you know, in different, you know, conversations or scenarios, you know, whether it's in church and in ministry, right? You know, it's important to keep that in mind, right? Whether it's in your marriage, it's important to keep that in mind. Culture and the world feeds us. Men are like this. They don't talk about their emotions, therefore you shouldn't ask. Men are to themselves. They're quiet. You know, they're silent. So don't ask, you know, what's happening because they're not going to tell you. They don't want to talk to you, right? That's a lie, right? I think that oftentimes it'll take, you know, a minute, right, to get a guy to, you know, really express themselves at times. I mean, we've even had, you know, like men's Bible study groups and, you know, book club meetings that we've had. And I remember it took a minute to like get everyone to like really start pouring out. And then when it started, it was like, all right, we can, you know, we got to stop. We got to pick this up at another time, you know, but if you just go by what culture tells you about men and women, I think you lose out on certain opportunities, right? And certain doors that God wants opened for you to express yourself, for you to be ministered to, for you to, receive something that maybe you didn't expect in that moment, right? But it kind of takes for both parties to understand that culture and how culture defines certain things isn't always true, especially in our relationship or within our ministry or within our circle of friends.
Yeah, and I think that everyone has room for flexibility, room for growth, and I think that also if you are connected with someone who's a dude, who's a guy who is really like, I say dude for some reason a lot, and that's my son's
Your
fault.
son says
that's
it all the time,
where they maybe are a stereotypical guy who, is like very quiet, nothing really bothers him, whatever. But then you ask them and they decide to open up and say something. I think that those moments are opportunities that will define how the relationship moves on going forward. If it's if you take that opportunity to really let them know that you acknowledge what they're saying and that you receive it and all that other stuff, then you're creating a safe space for them.
Yeah.
If you decide to be like, really? And then you like have all these like side comments and stuff like that about it, then it's kind of like, yeah, he's going to turn into a hermit crab again. He's not going to say anything. And I've seen that. I've seen situations that happen not only in relationships and friendships and stuff like that as well, where somebody will maybe use it and be like, I'm gonna take a chance, I'm gonna take a risk, and I'm gonna open up to someone, I'm gonna say a little something to see how they respond. And when they don't respond accordingly, that person then internalizes it and decides, I'm not going to be able to open that door with you again. You're not ready for that type of relationship or that type of form of communication. And then it takes more work to get a person back out of that. So I think that regardless if it's your spouse, man or woman, or if it's your friend or family member, when there's opportunities that come up where they're out of character for that person, there's someone who doesn't really talk a lot and all of a sudden has a lot to say, or there's someone that isn't really like outgoing and all of a sudden wants to do a random thing, take advantage of it. Be like, yeah, let's go, we're down, let's talk about it or whatever, just so that they know, what, with you I can do that. With you, I can open up that way. With you, it's a safe space versus it being like, yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times too, it really is I guess the standards are just like the norm of like what masculinity looks like or what manhood is, for certain individuals where they feel like this is how I have to be. So I have to be quiet. I have to, I don't talk. I don't express myself because that's like how it's supposed to be. Right. And I think that, even within ministry, I always look at things from that perspective. It's important, like I said, to not allow those standards to infiltrate and kind of take over. Where then when you see people, right, it's men, that's what we're talking about, when you see them kind of down or discouraged, that you just look at it like, that's normal. That's okay. And as a man, when you see somebody else like that, it's also important that you reach out. And it's also important that you just don't let that be the norm or be acceptable, because that's what it's supposed to be. Because in reality, I'm sure that man would love, right, to express himself and would love to kind of hear somebody else, even if they don't do a lot of talking, but hear somebody else, encourage them, right, and give them kind of, that advice or that encouragement that they need. And I think a lot of times when it comes to the church, right, we see that a lot where when you don't give the men an opportunity to speak and to share, they won't.
Yeah.
A lot of them, right? The minute you do, they have a lot to say.
Yeah.
And they have a lot that's on their mind. They have a lot that they want to share and want to express, right? It's allowing that environment, to be a safe space, like you said, and fostering an environment where they are okay sharing those things.
Yeah.
They are okay expressing themselves. They are okay, to say the pressures that they're experiencing, or, why they're silent and why they're always, acting a certain way or thinking a certain way. I think it's important to just make sure those spaces are created within our church.
Yes. Yeah, I was exactly going to say that. It's the idea of not allowing a stereotypical judgment to dictate what you do and how you operate. I remember, our men's camp was very stereotypical dude. We'll go, we'll pray, we'll fish, and then we'll come back and have like a little conference type of a thing. Like very like, you know, like a little bit rigid, I would say, but like very like manly. Let's go and like chop wood type of a thing. And I remember a few years back, you know, the conversation started to start about maybe we need to do something a little bit more. Maybe we need to do a little extra something, maybe even something creative where, you know, it'll be different and it'll create an opportunity for conversations to come up or things to be said. And, you know, some people are like, oh, no, the old folks aren't going to like that. You know, the old folks are very quiet. They don't like to do this. They don't like to do that. And I was like, yeah, but let's just do it anyways. And, you know, took the leap of faith. We did something creative anyways, and we saw how if we were to allow ourselves to go by what stereotypically we thought was going to happen, that opportunity wouldn't have been created for them. And I think that we as a church need to understand and look at, it's not about the demographic, it's not about the age, it's not about the cultural whatever. You really got to be like, you know what? Let's do something creative. Yeah. Let's do something fun. Let's do something different. Let's do something that, you know, puts people in a position to have to share thoughts. You know, we started the book club with the men this year, which is something that a lot of people would have maybe thought, it's going to be kind of whack because the guys aren't going to want to talk.
They're not going to read.
They're not going to read the book. They're just, you know, they'll show up for the coffee and then sit there and not say anything. Yeah. And it's been the opposite.
Complete opposite.
People are reading. People are highlighting. People have thoughts. People are expressing and they're opening up about certain things or whatever. So I think that, you know, there is opportunity for room and there's opportunity for growth, but sometimes men aren't given those opportunities because they're looked at, especially I think culturally, like in the Latino community, with like machismo and, you know, this idea of like what men operate in the world. They aren't given opportunities to even see if that's something they're interested in. A lot of men don't even know if they're painters because they've never been given the opportunity to paint. A lot of men, you know, one of the things that we did was with the Legos and, at the camp, and there were men that had never played with Legos in their life. And then you couldn't take it away from them because they were so interested and they were like building stuff.
And it was like a team building exercise. Yeah, so it wasn't like we just started playing with Legos. It was like an activity that was being done. But through that activity, there was also a sense of fun, right, and also a sense like I've never done this before, you know, and it was something that you had like younger men and older men, and you had, you know, people that didn't know each other, and it was just a way to bring everybody together. But again, you know, if you have that stereotype of this is not fun, they're not gonna want to do this. They just want to play with Legos, right? It would rob you of that opportunity and that moment to actually have a good time. You know, I'm reading this book, Raising Emotionally Strong Boys, and I was telling you about it. That, you know, it's a really good book and talks about just, you know, it's a father's perspective on raising his sons and tools and tips and all that. And, you know, he made a really good point as to how, and he's talking about boys, but then he always brings a conversation to men because these boys grow up and become adults. And he was saying how, you know, when it comes to raising boys and when it comes to, you know, this idea of manhood and all of that, that there's so many examples in the Bible of different types of men, right? And how they process information, how they thought. So he talks about Gideon, how God tells Gideon, you're a man of valor, you're a mighty man, you're a warrior. And Gideon's like, me, I'm the weakest. Like, you know, so Gideon had some self-esteem issues. There are men out there that have self-esteem issues, you know? And he goes on to talk about Jacob and Esau. They were brothers. They had the same parents, right? You would think that, you know, they would be like the same way or whatever. And we know that today you can have siblings that are complete opposites, right? But when it comes to manhood, right, when you look at Esau, the Bible described Esau as being cunning, right? And also being a hunter. So like he was like rough, you know what I mean? Like he was out there. He was the one that was, you know, probably super athletic and all of that. Then you had Jacob, who the Bible says liked to be with his stay at home, and he was his mother's favorite, which lets you know he had to spend a lot of time with his mother at home to be her favorite. And at the same time, it says, the Bible says that he's you know, spent his time, you know, tending to the animals in the field and dwelling in tents. So he was not out there getting dirty. He was not out there, you know, killing animals and hunting the way Esau was. But now, can we not see all that Jacob accomplished in his life and say that he was a man, right? And that he was a man of God? Can you not look at Esau, right? And see, and that same thing. So we get all of these different examples, right? In the Bible. We see someone like Jesus, right? And we see the example he was. And, you know, one of the things that he said in the book was how Jesus valued and esteemed women, and he honored them, you know? And I think that whenever we have the conversation of men and women, I think oftentimes, you know, and not everyone, right? But there are then those people that look at it like, you know, if it's men talking, they're attacking the women. If the women are talking, they're attacking the men, right? And I think that it's important within church context and ministry when you have these type of conversations to realize there's not attacks happening, right? There's no attack that's happening or comparison like we were talking about last week, right? But I think it's important to realize that in the same way Jesus did this and uplifted women and all of that, right? It is also our responsibility as men to do that. Now, you know, within the context of what we have, if we're married, you know, if we have children, if we have, you know, we have these responsibilities that we're given that we are to, you know, execute and we are to get the job done. But in order to do those things effectively, you need to be able to also take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And I think that at times, men can just go and go and go because there's a job to do. There's money that needs to be made. There are bills that have to be paid. There are things we need to get. You know, we're about to have a kid. There's a lot that's happening that then, again, all of these responsibilities and pressures begin to take chunks of who you are, begin to, you know, take chunks of your personality and the fun and the joy in your life, and you lose yourself in the end, you know? So I think it's important to understand the differences, right? But understand that you don't have to be quiet. You don't have to be silent. You don't have to hold everything in. You don't have to be always mentally stressed. You don't always have to be the provider in every single situation and everything. And if it messes up and you don't have enough of this, you failed and you did, right? So I think it's important that we also recognize that and don't hold, you know, ourselves to such high standards, right? That if we don't meet one of them or if we fail at one point, that, you know, we look like Gideon, where we're basically like, I'm nobody. I'm the weakest of my clan. I can't do that.
No, it's true. You know, and you were mentioning the book, Raising Emotionally Strong Boys. And last year, my wife and I were actually on like this. We were driving upstate, and I downloaded a bunch of different podcasts to listen on the way there. And actually, the author David Thomas was on a podcast called That Sounds Fun, and it's with Annie Downs, and it is the perfect, like, if you're not a reader, not everybody's a reader. But it's the perfect conversation for you to get insight on what that is. Because I think that a lot of times also, you know, raising boys is difficult. You know, boys turn into men. And there are a lot of things that sometimes maybe you don't have experience in that it will be really good for you to go ahead, you know, listen to the podcast, pick up the book. At the end of the day, you know, like we spoke about with the Hope Priscilla thing or whatever, we're raising kids that are going to be the adults of the next couple of years that are going to be making, you know, all the decisions in the world. So we want to make sure that when it comes to our boys, we're raising them up to be strong men. And when we say strong men, that doesn't only mean physically, but we want them emotionally strong, mentally strong. And so check that podcast. Spiritually strong. Yes, very important. So you could check that podcast out. Just, you know, in whatever podcasting you use, you can go ahead and look up David Thomas, Raising Emotionally Strong Boys. And if that one doesn't come up, another one will come up, and, you know, really dive into the book. It's really informative. You know, there are things that you'll learn that you'd be like, oh, that's cool to apply, and then other things like, yeah, that kind of wouldn't work for me for whatever reason, and that's okay. You keep it moving.
Yeah, absolutely. So we hope you were encouraged by this episode, that you found some humor in it as well, because it's things that you can relate to, right? And, you know, it's important to just remember the aspect of communication and speaking and you know, letting your spouse know, or letting your friend know, your brother know, your sister know, right? Whoever it is that you are engaging in life with, right? That you have that open dialogue about these things, and you don't let culture dictate how you should be, how you should act, and you talk it out.
Talk it out and be understanding. You know, that thing that is very important. Be understanding. Learn how to read. If you're in a relationship, your significant other, be understanding.
You said learn how to read.
Yeah, learn how to read them. That's what I meant. Learn how to read too. If you don't know how to read,
yes, pick up a book.
It's okay. Right? It's okay. Everybody's upbringing is different. You know, it's fine. And, you know, at the end of the day, as always, I feel like we always are just pushing opportunities for conversations to be had. You know, this is a great opportunity to have that conversation with your boyfriend, with your husband, with whoever. Or if you're the dude that's listening to this and you're like, you know, my wife doesn't get it that when I space out, I'm just, I'm thinking about nothing important. Don't throw this to her. put the podcast on and be like, hey babe, listen to this with me, and you could go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at God Life Culture Podcast. Subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us there, and be sure to catch our new episodes that come out every Monday.
Yes.
And we hope that you are out there enjoying the weather, enjoying the sun. Summer is, spring is in full effect, and summer is on its way. So with all of that comes a lot of fun.
Yeah, so thank you once again for tuning into the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. That's
God Life Culture.
Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.